Hey there, this is the Jade Tooth Project, and today I'm coming online to talk to you about just how good of solutions that nature provides, and how all of this stuff with dentistry and toxic metals, toxic dental cements, toxic fillings, and toxic numbing agents, how all this stuff is really unnecessary, how this was a manufactured problem, and how actually the solutions have been around for thousands of years, and it's only been the intentional neglect of humans, the misinformation, power dynamics, vested interest, and just willful ignorance has created all these problems. So, yeah, it's heavy stuff, but good news is there's simple fixes. In permaculture, there's this quote from the founder of permaculture, Bill Mollison. He says something like, "In our world, the problems are becoming increasingly complex, while the solutions remain embarrassingly simple." And I think that really applies to the Jade Tooth Project and really everything that's occurring right now globally with manufactured disease, industrial harm, billionaire and trillionaire now influences, lobbies. So, where to start? I guess I should start by saying I'm going really off the cuff with this one. Don't take anything I say as fact. And in fact, I have to tell you that I'm not a licensed medical practitioner, and this is not medical advice. That you should not act on any information that I share in this video, and I'm not liable if you do, and that this is for educational purposes only. So don't take me seriously at all. um, Basically, we're in this situation right now where, like everyone, like globally, really, we're in the situation right now across all of humanity where if people want help, if people have serious issues with their teeth, particularly, then their only option is to go to a dentist. And people who are alternatively minded, more herbally inclined, they they think that going to a holistic dentist is more aligned with their values and their preferences. But unfortunately, they're also operating under the same pretenses and industrial model that conventional dentists are. There's really not that big of a difference between holistic dentists and conventional dentists. Most holistic dentists won't put amalgam in people. That's the biggest difference. And they might even remove amalgam. But to pretend that they're actually helping people's health instead of hurting them is a huge fallacy. They're they're just slightly better dentists, and that doesn't really it's not a high bar, I'll put it that way. So people are in the situation where they're damned if they do and damned if they don't by going to a dentist. Because it's not good to have teeth rotting in our mouths. Clearly, it's it's not good to not have regular dental cleanings, especially with the way that they teach us to take care of our teeth, which is incredibly insufficient and does not actually clean our teeth the way that they need, and is relatively unproven even for oral health. And even when people go to dentists, those dentists don't even really know how to fully clean people's teeth. It's shocking, but it's the truth. A lot of dentists are doing a mediocre job, and that's why people have to come back and get fillings, and then they have to get tooth extractions when it gets too bad. They have to get root canals. They have to get bridges. They have to get dentures, and all sorts of interventions that clearly aren't working. Why would people have to keep going back to the dentist if dentists were helping people's oral health? What it would actually look like if people were helping, if dentists were helping people's oral health, it would look like basically putting a lot of dentists out of the job. And of course, no dentist is interested in that. Very few are. So there's incentive for reliance to be created. And that's a really slippery slope. But beyond that, there's a lot of ignorance, there's a lot of misinformation, dogma, online, even in the textbooks, in dental school, on TV, in books, everywhere. Industry has so thoroughly changed the scene and the information sphere around actual dental care that now the culture itself is perpetuating these myths. And it's socially reinforced. It's kind of like, I don't know what they call that in China or North Korea, where like everyone's reporting each other all the time, like checking in on their neighbors and just basically being the secret agents for the government, just the populace. Like that's basically what's happening with the dental industry. They've gotten so into people's heads with their propaganda that it's hard to even talk to people about these things without being bombarded with emotionally charged rhetoric, pressure, recommendations, advice, unwarranted advice, unsolicited advice, and so a lot of people just end up going to the dentist and trusting the authority. But the authority has misled people so much that they get stuck into these loops of disease and dependency. So that's the overview of the problem. And I could get into a lot more specifics, but fact is, there are really simple solutions to this stuff, and it's not going to come from the top down. Not anytime soon, at least. Not under the current global capitalistic system that's dominating this industry and regulating this industry and educating everyone who goes into this profession. I'm not saying there's a big global conspiracy happening. Like, this isn't some Illuminati stuff happening. Like, this is the influence of many different groups across many different cultures, languages, countries, and even lineages of medical thought, all acting under the same evolutionary forces. It's kind of like when in the late 1700s, all the major world powers just started colonizing the global south, and that wasn't a coordinated effort. That was a tide of the times. That was a larger systemic dynamic. that swept across all of humanity, and the same thing is happening right now. It's like the memes, and by that I mean the units of information that are circulating, have just really gotten so toxic, and it's a self-reinforcing feedback loop, because the toxicity in the information sphere is coming from the biological toxicity that people are receiving from petrochemicals and metals being thoroughly inundated through people's systems, and that reinforces destructive patterns of thought. The mind and the body are not disconnected. So dentists are just as toxified as their patients. They're receiving the same type of dental care, and this creates a sort of vibration that people operate within. You know, not not to use new agey slang, but like it's it puts people on a certain into a into a certain mind state, into a certain biological pattern of thought, of mental frequency. It's it's a wavelength problem, and a lot of these wavelengths have actually been proven. You can look at brain scans and see that, like, when people are operating in certain states of mind, their wavelengths, the energy patterns that are flowing across their brain, are measurable and distinguished. And you know, if you're looking at someone who's doing hard intellectual work, it's going to be a much different frequency than someone who's meditating. And it's the same thing with someone who has heavy metal toxicity or disruption in their hormonal system from BPA or fluoride or whatever else. And that versus someone who has a clean system, and someone who is detoxing themselves from the constant assaults of society's toxins. So there are limiting factors, though, to every reinforcing feedback loop. There's always another feedback loop which halts that infinite regress and starts taking it in a new direction. And that we can really attribute that to higher consciousness. So this is a biochemical matter, this is a scientific matter, and it's also a spiritual matter. And people's spirits are being diminished, being suppressed. And in a sense, this is intentional. These chemicals are known to make people more complacent and complicit and obedient and subject to authority. So it's not that every dentist knows this, and I'm not saying every dentist is a supervillain trying to control humanity. It's not the case. but on a grand scale, that's the effect that these toxins are having on people. It hinders people's ability to think for themselves, to take their medical care into their own hands, to develop innovative, intelligent solutions that are non-invasive, that are not painful, that are not harmful and destructive and degenerative. So the higher consciousness that needs to come in this industry, the realization, first of all, the acknowledgement and the realization that the entire industry is based on lies, that deceit has thoroughly tainted the practices, every single practice of dentists. And, this extends far beyond dentistry, of course, but that's the focus of this channel, so I'll try to stay on track. That needs to be acknowledged, first of all, that the model is wrong. On a moral level, on a practical level, and even on a scientific level. Once that can be acknowledged and accepted emotionally, like it's really an emotional issue for a lot of people. Their livelihoods are based in this. Their whole social network is reinforcing these concepts. And people think that their health depends upon these things being true. And that's really the dangerous part. When people can accept that these industries are actually making them sicker and not giving them their health back, then the game can start to change. But it's also a big leap from that understanding and that realization, that acknowledgement, to actively implementing the new solutions. The regenerative solutions, the non-invasive solutions, the simpler solutions, the biological solutions, the ones that do not cause cancer and genotoxicity and cytotoxicity and a whole host of other diagnoses and actions that I can't even begin to cover. No matter how long of a list I gave it, it won't even scratch the surface. I mean, I can't name the statistics right now. Like I said, this is off the cuff, but if you look at how many diseases exist today, how many diagnoses exist today versus 2,000 years ago, or 5,000 years ago, it's mind-blowing. It was like in the tens of thousands, the number of diseases that existed for early humans. Now we have millions. Why is this? Did new microbes just start populating on Earth? No. New degenerative conditions didn't just start coming out of nowhere. They are a direct result of human intervention, and the wrong kind. They're a direct result of people mining metals from the earth, putting them into the atmosphere, and putting them into their bodies. And furthermore, once oil started being drilled out of the earth, then disease just exploded. Which is when modern medicine was invented, which is when allopathic medicine literally was invented less than 200 years ago. So there's a direct correlation with these things. It's hard to ignore once you can see it. So all I hope is to bring that bit of insight into people's lives, to plant that seed of consciousness, and to watch it grow, because that's really how simple it is. Like, if you want to explain most disease on Earth, there you go. It's mining. And yes, it's more nuanced than that. But no, it's not that much more complicated than that. It's like, that's the crux of it. So it's a really simple solution. We stop relying on mined materials. At least mass industrial mined materials that are processed with toxic chemicals, toxic petrochemicals. It's this is a clear distinction that people are not seeming to make across the world right now. That if this line could be drawn between what is natural and what is artificial, and yeah, you can say everything is artificial. I mean, sorry. Yeah, everything's artificial, but everything, you could say everything is natural. You could say metals are natural. Okay, well, if you're going that far, well, oil is natural. It was naturally made by million-year-old plant matter and dinosaur bones breaking down in the earth over time. And yes, it's a natural process. It's microbially driven. It's not something that humans did. They didn't invent oil. They didn't invent metals. These things were here on Earth. That's natural, sure. What's not natural is to bring them out of the deep earth where they were intelligently stored by the intelligence, thinking mind of our earth. They were put deep, deep down and locked away for a reason. And to undo this, intelligent design is just asking for trouble. And when you look at how it's done, it makes sense. I've seen a mine directly with my own two eyes. I visited a coal mine. I got a tour. I saw the machines. I saw the earth that they were just obliterating. And it's a horrific sight. It looks like death and destruction. There's no life there. It's a mechanical wasteland. These are the largest machines I've ever seen in my life. Like, think about the biggest crane you've ever seen or the biggest excavator. That times 500 or 1,000. Like, the monsters that they have eating into the earth and just decimating the life that was once there. They have to chop down forests to get to the coal underneath of it. And then they have to dig these giant pits. Or if they don't do that, then they go under and they use explosives, and it's insanity. And when you look at that, it's no wonder that the product of that process looks very similar to the process itself. Coal, if you tried to eat it, you would die. Like, this stuff is toxic. If you inhale its fumes, like, you're probably gonna get cancer. A lot of people do. A lot of coal miners, they're inhaling fumes from coal all the time. They get black lung. What is black lung? The lungs shriveling and dying from coal exposure, from coal dust exposure. And it's horrific that they even use human workers for this stuff. But of course, they don't value the lives of the people working in these mines. Why would they? It's reflective of how they don't value the end result of these processes either. They're solely interested in money. And if this line could be drawn between what is artificial and what is natural, then people could actually start to achieve health again. People could reclaim true health. And it's going to take some time because the earth is so saturated right now with petrochemicals and metals. In my video, How Did It Get This Bad?, I talk a little bit about how the levels of some of the most toxic metals on Earth have risen exponentially over the course of recent human history. And we're breathing this stuff in all the time. I mean, it's worse for people in cities, but it's everywhere. Microplastics are everywhere. Metals are everywhere. Hormone disrupting petrochemicals are everywhere. And every action in our body, everything that our genes or DNA are doing, is hormonally driven. So you should be able to see that this stuff is consequential. The way that literally every protein, every cell in our bodies are made is affected by this. So when every single cell in our bodies is disrupted, then of course the larger patterns of our behavior, of societal dynamics, of cultural dynamics, these things are going to be influenced too. So if you're interested in sociology, anthropology, humanism, anything that has to do with how people interact and behave, even psychology, and particularly every field of medicine, then this should be in the forefront of your consciousness because it's all pervasive and spares no one. It takes no hostages. So I'm just trying to get to the bottom of why people have trouble making this distinction. And I can really, start to begin to understand it when I look at my own past, the way I used to behave and operate and think. I was born into this world and I didn't know any different. I was born into this, like deep in it, really at the heart of the empire. And I thought it was normal. I didn't have these distinctions. I just took what my parents gave me and what the culture taught me and accepted that for truth. Couldn't see outside of that. That's really the nature of human beings. But part of our progression and advancement through life is gaining more consciousness and awareness through the right education and making more distinctions. We get smarter as we get older, our brains develop, and learning is really, in one sense, just a process of making more fine distinctions. So here's one of the distinctions I find to be most important: the line between what is natural and what is artificial. Even simulation theory is kind of an outcropping, or like a psychological, cultural result of how synthetic our civilization has become. People are so inundated with synthetic materials in their bodies that they start to believe that they're actually not natural beings. This is really concerning. This is a big problem. And it's just not true. Simulation theory is false. But I guess that's beyond the scope of this channel. Um, I just I see how people have really become so detached from their humanness, from the fact that they are animals, they are biological beings, they are conscious, real creatures with their own sovereignty, with their own free will, with their own relationship to this earth, to this planet, the fact that they came from this earth, they were born of it, they will die to it, and I just want to give a little bit of hope that like we can all start to feel that a little bit again on an embodied scale. It's possible. And it starts with purifying our vessels of synthetic chemicals and elements. Our brains start to function better when we do this. We find more groundedness. We find more peace. We find more clear and actually logical thinking. Less franticness, less theorizing, less mind games, and less disease, less illness, more happiness, more health. The way we were designed by evolution, I really think of our bodies, of any human body, as a healing machine, as a regenerative. It's funny I use that word because I just said we're biological. It's an expression. Um, Machine in the sense of like powerful, like unstoppable force, just constructed for the purpose of this task, of this function of healing. I guess you could say maybe a better term for it would be healing warrior, or healing systems. We we are designed by evolution to heal ourselves, for our bodies to go in, read our genetic code, transcript our DNA in a way to create these bodies. And when these bodies are damaged, those same systems are in place that built us the first time to build us again. That doesn't stop. That doesn't stop at birth. That doesn't stop after childhood. That doesn't stop in your mid 20s or your mid 30s. That is something that every human is perpetually doing all the time. No matter how toxified they are, as long as someone's heart is still beating, their cells are regenerating. Their DNA is trying to fix itself. The problem is that sometimes it gets overwhelmed. The system gets overwhelmed by artificial chemicals, and it just struggles to express itself correctly. There become mutations, and it's like what's the expression? A wrench in the cogs, or stick in the gears. I don't know. You get my point. Like, we're built to fend off these things, and that's really the amazing part. Even though metals and petrochemicals really have come recently in human development as a biological force to contend with, our immune systems know how to respond to them really well. And it's only when they become too overburdened that we start to see serious signs of disease manifest. And I guess this brings me into talking about germ theory. So this is really the juicy part that I've been waiting for in this video. I wanted to address germ theory. A lot of people may not know. I also talked about this in my previous video, How Did It Get This Bad? You know, when Rockefeller invented modern medicine, basically, started pushing pharmaceutical propaganda, shutting down all the herbal schools across first North America, and then the influence spread. This is when germ theory was invented, and they taught us in school that germ theory was like discovered, like it was some natural law that people thankfully figured out recently, and that's why we have soap nowadays, and it's why, I don't know, people aren't dying from the plague anymore. Some story like this. Really, what happened is the invention of germ theory. It is a theory, not a law, not a proven fact. It's a theory that was invented recently, and it's a really bad one in my opinion. It's just, it has so many gaps, and its implications don't result in human health. They don't. Because, first of all, germ theory posits that microbes are the main cause of disease, and particularly infectious disease. But they posit that lots of diseases are microbially rooted and influenced, and this is kind of the opposite of the case. Actually, microbial expressions are generally a result of, almost a symptom of, biochemical imbalance that starts with toxification. It's almost like the microbiome is an indicator. It's like these are indicator species of toxicity, and that the different cultures that cohabitate and start to dominate, even to the level of cancer, are an expression of a larger imbalance than just viral microbes. So that's the first part. The second part is what germ theory does to human psychology is it makes people afraid of the invisible. This constant anxiety and fear about the invisible actually is not a benevolent, healthy MO for people to be operating under. If they're seeing the world as dirty around them, then this creates a certain mind state, and this mind state influences the rest of our biology. And states of anxiety are one of the most destructive to our systems. Ancient Chinese medicine talks about this, how worry is one of the biggest root causes of illness. I think there's some truth to that. Beyond this, people's response to that fear, that stress, that anxiety, that mental model of germs causing disease, typically is to spray everything with toxic petrochemicals. And this is where the real problem comes in. We saw this during COVID. It's horrific. And of course, this is pushed by companies like Lysol, Clorox. It was really horrific to see images of people in hazmat suits going around putting pesticides into public buildings with people in them, just fumigating entire neighborhoods. And the places that people live and breathe with some really harsh stuff that are not proven safe, that generally have a lot of evidence to show that they will kill people at the right concentrations. So that's the extreme of this mentality. That's what happens when you take germ theory to its extreme. It results in a totally sterile environment, which is no environment at all. Our bodies are made of microbes. Half of our cells in our body are foreign cells. They're not human cells. Half. So, do you want to be half dead? Well, then sterilize everything around you. These microbes did not evolve to hurt us. I can't stress this enough. Every life form came about from millions and millions of generations, if not billions, of maybe even trillions of generations of evolutionary design. So to think that there's no intelligence in that even the tiniest microbes, even the most viral pathogens are just here to hurt us, to me that's absurdity. I think life is smarter than that. And when we look into the science, this idea is proven true. And a good example, to loop it back to dentistry, is the bacteria in our mouths. So I was looking into the chemicals that are used for adhesives and dental cements to attach fillings to people's teeth and other dental restorations. And basically, these adhesives are designed by the industry to penetrate the microtubules of our teeth, which means they soak into our teeth. And if you look at a bottle of super glue and look at the warning label on the back, you probably won't want to put that shit in your mouth. But that's basically what dentists are doing to people. And then they stuff some plastic over top of that, or worse. And then over years and years, this stuff soaks into our teeth. To think that's free of consequences, insanity. And so, this happened to me. And that's why I had my fillings removed and not replaced. Because I don't want it to happen again. And thankfully I was smarter than that. There are certain aspects that I have to take into my own hands now, but I'd rather do that a million times over than ever let them put that stuff in my mouth again. And basically, I was looking into how can these residual chemicals, which have soaked into my own teeth, that have leached into my system, how can they be removed? How can they be leached out quicker so that they're not constantly titrating into my system for many years to come? And one interesting thing that I found is that a bacteria called something like Streptococcus mutans, which is generally regarded as a pathogenic bacteria, a cavity-causing bacteria in the mouth. This bacteria actually produces enzymes which speed up the leaching of these chemicals, which break down these chemicals and help remove them from the teeth faster. They're called esterases, and there's an example of a bacteria that people think that they need to kill helping us, actually helping us. There's a lot of other examples like this where the microbes that scientists have deemed as fully malevolent, pure agents of chaos and disease, that's not the whole story. These microbes came in to help us. COVID, even things as bad as salmonella and malaria and all of these the flu, the microbes that are behind these, their intention is not to hurt us. Like I said, their expression, the fact that you can test for these and these microbial populations in excess correlate with certain diseases, that's almost what scientists have been doing is conflating correlation with causation. They've been seeing the result as the cause. And the truth is, in healthy individuals with functioning immune systems without high toxic loads, with adequate nutrition and vitamin levels and mineral levels, these microbes can exist in people's bodies without causing disease. And they do. And that's why they say that some people are asymptomatic or carriers. The model is wrong. In fact, I would posit that the microbes that they're correlating with these diseases are actually there to undo the damage of the actual root problem of the core issue, which is actually causing the disease. Life is here to help us, and modern medicine has forgotten this completely, and that's why they try to poison everything. But where does it get us? If we poison everything, it gets us to a world full of death and destruction and degeneration and disease. What happens when we purify everything? What happens when we embrace life and welcome it in? What happens when we stop being afraid of all life? Well, life can thrive. Health can manifest. I talked about this in my video on permaculture, how permaculture can reform dentistry. The concept of biodiversity and how there's this concept in permaculture that you just, whenever there's like, when it seems to be in excess of a certain life form in a system, like if too much whitefly comes into your garden, or if you're having I don't know, a beetle plague or whatever, or if there's some fungus taking over, it's like, don't react to this with chemicals. That's the strategy in permaculture. Don't react. Let it solve itself. In nature, there's always going to be a regulating force that comes in. It just takes patience. When one biological system starts to overwhelm and become in excess, that creates a food source for something else. So the regulating influence is going to come in and balance the system again. But it's a dynamic flux. It's a dynamic equilibrium. And that's what life is. It's always changing, never static. And the same thing happens within our bodies. If people didn't respond to microbes and fungal or bacterial or viral conditions within their own bodies with chemicals, with synthetic substances, with industrially processed petrochemical metallic based solutions, then they would find that their systems naturally regulate and balance themselves, that there would be some other thing to come in and regulate that. And sometimes that's a plant, sometimes that's another fungus or bacteria or virus. You know, we have these brains for a reason. We have the oral tradition of plant medicine for a reason. We're active agents of our own health. And in this modern world especially, we have to be. We have to be conscious, intelligently responding organisms to ensure our own safety and survival and health. Thank God we have the internet. Thank God we have tons of books. Thank God we have still oral tradition to inform us how we can respond to certain diseases with natural means, without reactive measures, with intentional, time-tested folk remedies. And this is why anecdotal evidence a lot of the time is better evidence than scientific evidence. There was a meta-review on scientific studies themselves, and it showed that about 50% of all scientific studies can't be reproduced at all. They're just bogus. And that's because industry invented a lot of these studies. They manufactured the results, and that was paid for by people who wanted a specific result to push their products, their pharmaceuticals, or whatever it may be. But even without books and the internet and oral tradition, even if we were taken back and reverted to just being dumb, basic creatures, almost animalistic, living on this planet the way it is right now, without the information we have, if we just lived naturally, if we just didn't respond with chemicals all the time,